All right, we have a lot of questions today after the DOJ released more than 3 million documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. Emails in the files suggest Bill Gates had additional affairs and sought medication to treat an STD from, quote, Russian girls. The documents also suggest that he wanted to give that medication to his wife without her knowledge. Bill Gates spoke out today denying the claims.
Apparently, Jeffrey wrote an email to himself. That email was never sent. The email is, false. So I don't know what his thinking was there. It just reminds me, every minute I spent with him, I regret and I, apologize that I did that.
But it's also interesting to hear from his ex-wife, Melinda Gates.
I'm able to take my own sadness and look at those young girls and say, my God, how did that happen to those girls, right? And so for me, it's just sadness for, I left my marriage. I had to leave my marriage. I wanted to leave my marriage. I had to leave I felt I needed to eventually leave the foundation. So it's just sad.
Right, another name mentioned in the files, the Clintons. They've been called to testify before Congress. President Trump, though, calling the whole thing with the Clintons a shame.
I think it's a shame, to be honest. I always liked him. Her, she was a very capable woman. She was better in debating than some of the other people, I will tell you that. She was smart woman. I hate to see it in many ways. I hate to see it, but then I look at me. They went after me like, they wanted me to go to jail for the rest of my life.
Good morning. Today is Friday, February 6, 2026. The fallout continues from the Jeffrey Epstein saga. Now, the Labour Party in the UK is firing various staff and members of its elite who've been found inside of the Epstein files. What will happen when it gets all the way to Prince Andrew? And why hasn't anybody lost their job, their role, or their livelihood here in the States? Why have there been political ramifications in places like Slovenia, where a member of parliament had to resign, Finland, the UK, but nothing here in the United States of America? All we have is Bill and Hillary Clinton having to testify. We talked about that yesterday with Jamie Comer. Well, we're going to discuss the nature of Jeffrey Epstein and what he actually created while he lived his heinous years here on this earth with a man who knows very much the dark corners of the life of Jeffrey Epstein and what was the actual operation that was being run. Mike Benz will be joining the program. I think probably the best way to describe him is a historian of all things interesting and a man who always brings the receipts. And he will do so today live on the show. My name is Benny Johnson, and this is The Benny Show. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been running this week. We have been on multiple trips and back into the studio, making sure that we are always here for you to deliver the news, and there's been a lot of it. The blackout coffee in my coffee mug keeps us going. It was very interesting because we were hanging out with RFK Jr. and Kid Rock, okay? And I know you're probably tired of hearing about it. And we're just getting to editing this content, and this footage is going to be very, very interesting. But the two of them have throughout the course of their lives taken various different things to stimulate them and to keep them going. And we talked a lot about that. And both are pretty open, right, about addiction and so on. And I can very proudly report to you that I am addicted only to caffeine. And that is my stimulant. And that blackout coffee is what keeps me going. Ladies and gentlemen, I love their fresh, crisp, rich, dark roasts in the morning. And they are unapologetically patriotic. They love their country. And they love making sure that they give us the power to fight the communist. It's perfect for work, travel, or keeping at your desk in a go bag. Go to blackoutcoffee.com/Benny. Use the code Benny for 20% off your first order. That's blackoutcoffee.com/Benny. Support American jobs with Blackout Coffee. Okay. Wanted to hop on over here and chat with you about something remarkable that happened on our program this week that I loved. And it was Alex Jones saying that the Epstein files is truly the Rosetta Stone of exposing the occult and exposing, well, Satanists, frankly. And he likened it to a battle between good and evil, and that all President Trump needs to do is to lean in on the releases inside of the Epstein documents, and they would be so totally and thoroughly discredited, indefensible, the public would be scandalized, and that the globalist elites' heads would explode because now the public would see them for who they truly are. And I found it remarkable that Alex Jones, in talking about this, the occult activity inside of the Epstein files, was followed up by Joe Rogan, pretty much saying, you know what, Alex Jones was telling me about all this stuff for 10 years. And 10 years ago, I thought he was insane. And now it turns out he was right. He was right about all of it. And so should President Trump lean in? Well, we kind of saw that at the prayer breakfast yesterday. Donald Trump saying that prayer and Christianity is the secret weapon of America. Here's Joe Rogan saying Alex Jones has been right.
He was the guy who told me about
everything.
Epstein's Island more than a decade ago, and I thought it was the craziest thing I'd ever heard. I was like, what are you saying? There's an island. Like, it sounds like a plot in a movie. There's an island where they fly famous rich scientists and politicians, and they compromise them with underage girls and get it on film so they could use it against them. I'm like, what? That sounds like horseshit. That sounds like lizard people. It sounds like, 5G creates COVID. Same thing. Yeah. But turns out it was true. And it's one of many things.
Turns out it was true. Hearing him explain it like that, you're like, you know what? Man, if they only just had trapdoors, If you could just add one final thing to the villainous, cartoonishly villainous, straight out of central casting nature to all this, it'd be a trapdoor. And lo and behold, in searching in our Epstein files relentless pursuit of the truth, we have found ourselves a trapdoor. Not only that, we found ourselves looking at a series of emails, hundreds of them, that prove that Jeffrey Epstein was utterly obsessed with the tunnels under his island leading to this trapdoor. This is the trapdoor on Epstein Island. And some people have speculated as to a nefarious nature, but you can see in what are literally hundreds of emails Jeffrey Epstein's obsession with a secret tunnel maze underneath the island. Now, is there any evidence these tunnels actually exist? Yes, in fact. Well, one of the earliest attempts at storming Epstein's island and trespassing on it shows this. There you go. Clearly, a entry point to a subterranean terrestrial portal to something. Yeah, it's just like a door, but it's leading somewhere. Where does it go? What are these tunnels used for exactly? Another conspiracy theory turns out to be true. Epstein files show disgraced financier obsessed with tunnels under his pedophile island. Yes, he was constantly obsessed with tunnels. Now, we've read to you and shown you many of the emails that suggest or just overtly declare that Jeffrey Epstein or his inner circle were murdering people, torturing people, and discarding people. This is an allegation that was sent saying that there are 2 foreign women who have been buried on the Zorro Ranch out in New Mexico. They were strangled, mutilated. Here are more allegations. This is from Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, these aren't allegations. This is just believe what they're writing in black and white. No one will lie to me and get away with it. No one. I give you permission to kill him. Oh, okay. I mean, all right. Here's Martin Nowak. Martin Nowak is a Harvard professor to Jeffrey Epstein. Did you torture her? Keep this name in mind, by the way. Where are you? Are you okay? I loved the torture video, says Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, okay. What do you want me to do to her? Do you want me to torture her? Says Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, all right. I'm starting to sense a little bit of a trend here. Another trend you could sort of suss out of all of this, something that Mike Benz has talked to us a lot about, and he'll be joining in just a moment. He said Jeffrey Epstein was clearly somebody who was working with or on behalf of the intelligence community. Last known photograph of Jeffrey Epstein, he's wearing an IDF shirt. Jeffrey Epstein winking and nodding at Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Literally winking. I'm not Mossad. No, you're Mossad. No, I'm not Mossad. No, you're Mossad. Here's a confidential human source report from the FBI saying that Jeffrey Epstein trained as an Israeli spy. Very detailed, by the way. And that he was in Israel training as an Israeli spy, and this was at the direction of the Israeli Prime Minister. Israeli Prime Ministers get special privileges, by the way. Here, I found a photo of Bibi Netanyahu. That photo has been blacked out. Strange that. Ladies and gentlemen, what could these tunnels, what could the obsession with the tunnels be? Exactly. Man, this is scary. It is, in fact, scary. Remember that Harvard professor, Martin Nowak? He was emailing, obsessed with bringing a specific woman to the island, going back and forth about travel details. Did you torture her? Martin writes to Jeffrey Epstein. Martin says, our spy was captured after completing her mission. Dude, what? Oh, wait, what? Torturing and discarding of spies? I'm not going to get too crazy here, but is this what the trapdoor is about? Apparently this goes into shark-infested waters. I don't know. I play you the Joe Rogan clip because it's like, he says this is straight out of a spy movie. This sounds like it's straight out of a Hollywood screenwrite. And yeah, including the trapdoor, the espionage, the spying, and the slavery and torture. U.S. Attorney's Office memo cites Ghislaine Maxwell for selling girls into slavery and torture. Harvard business professor Martin Nowak's emails to Ghislaine Maxwell thanks her for her hospitality. And he says, I'm so happy that I didn't kill anyone. Thanks again for your hospitality. Here we go. Dear Ghislaine. They're so proper here, by the way. Dearest Ghislaine, I'm so happy that I did not kill anyone. Thank you for your amazing hospitality. My perspective on life has changed somehow. The world's perspective on Jeffrey Epstein has changed somehow. And the man who has changed it has been on this program many, many times. And he is somebody who has told us about this ecosystem and did so bravely when virtually no one was talking about it, and has, I mean, even up into a dinner I had this week, like informed me as to the nature of Jeffrey Epstein and his relation with the CIA. Alex Jones banged his fist on the table and said it all ties back to the CIA. That was the funder of Jeffrey Epstein. That's where it all originates from. And the man who really has the receipts on that truly is Mike Benz, who joins us live right now. Mike, welcome back to the program. Congratulations on a very successful week. 48 hours ago, I was having dinner with RFK Jr., and he asked the question to the table, where do you think Epstein actually got his money? And RFK Jr. says that he'd met Epstein, and he's big in left-wing funding circles, right? And RFK Jr. had gone there, and he said he still has no idea where Epstein got his money. I said the CIA, dude. Les Wexner, CIA, transporting aircraft, vehicles, drugs, guns for the CIA in the airfields of Ohio, and that's because of you, Mike. You educated me, and so I thank you for that.
Sorry, I'm getting feedback right here. I can hear my own voice. Just FYI. Okay, so the thing that I think the Epstein moment gives an opportunity for the American people to understand is that when you say like money from the CIA, there's a difference between being paid by the CIA and facilitating a CIA transaction where there's something in it for you. So, for example, Jeffrey Epstein in terms of where he got his money, the New York Times attempted to answer this question in something like a 20,000 word report. And they said, oh, it's no mystery at all. He got it because he made Bear Stearns partner very quickly within 4 years from 1976 to 1980. And the reason he moved up so fast was because the head of the firm set him up with his daughter. So he's dating the boss's daughter right away. And then he kept working with Bear Stearns on deals continuously for the next 31 years. And it was these deals that made him wealthy. And then they proceeded to not mention a single deal name. And the thing that, they interviewed 3 of his bosses. They interviewed about like a dozen different personnel who worked with Bear Stearns. And they said, they put him on the most lucrative deals. And he was untouchable within Bear Stearns because he was dating the CEO's daughter, the same senior executive who recruited him to Bear Stearns in 1976. In 1978 became the CEO. So, and this actually does make a lot of sense. I've worked with investment bankers a lot personally when I was a corporate lawyer, and even corporate law firms adjacent where our clients were the investment bankers. It works a very similar way in terms of people can be untouchable in the firm because of various nepotistic relationships and things like that, regardless of how skilled they are. But the fact is the most lucrative deals at the time in that firm would have been the transactions involving BCCI. BCCI was the CIA's bank. It was created in Pakistan in 1972. And then in the late 1970s, it began to be radically upscaled with massive deposits by the CIA and the NSA in order to launder money to run guns to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan by way of Pakistan. And BCCI, Bear Stearns, there were 3 parties in this. There was, on the one hand, you had the actual money launderer, which was this Pakistani bank. It was what the Senate Intelligence Report referred to as the bank of banks within BCCI. Its name was Capcom. You had the bank that cleaned the money, BCCI, a totally fraudulent bank that went down in flames after all this came out. And it was Bill Barr and Bob Mueller who whitewashed this thing. Bill Barr wrote the pardons for the 6 BCCI officials who were indicted on this. Okay, so this is how far in the 90s. Okay, in 1991, 92. And Bob Mueller was who the left-wing press was blaming for blocking investigation into just how deep the CIA role went, because they maintained all these accounts. There was firsthand testimony from the branch managers of BCCI that they frequently spoke with the CIA to covertly structure the funds so that it wouldn't look like it was coming from the CIA, but it was regular contact and upkeep and maintenance from CIA case officers and their contacts. And Mueller and Barr blocked that 30 years ago, now 35 years ago. And that was a Jeffrey Epstein transaction. Bear Stearns cleared about $13 billion in modern currency of transactions of a CIA bank involved in trafficking, cleaning drug money and other illicit sources of fund, and using clean cash to buy guns to fund Islamo-terrorist groups. And then what you see very quickly is, by the way, this explains why the State Department leased out the second largest property in New York City to Jeffrey Epstein after they seized it from the government of Iran. Because in 1979, when Iran turned over, Epstein was involved in all these Middle Eastern deals, gun deals, like I've mentioned many times. This network runs through something called the Safari Club as well as Iran-Contra. But it was this money network. That explains how he got Adnan Khashoggi, the world's most prolific and richest arms dealer, as his client. It explains how he had clients in the UK, France, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States, because those were the main countries involved in the Safari Club. It also it explains, for example, how it is that Jeffrey Epstein's deal with the State Department broke up. As we've talked about, Benny, go ahead and try to go on Airbnb and rent a property directly from the Department of State. Or, I don't know, I can count on 0 fingers how many people I've ever even heard of that can personally rent property directly from the State Department in New York City after they seize it from a foreign government. But the fact is Jeffrey Epstein got in trouble because he subleased that property to 2 people, one a lawyer for the defendants in the Pizza Connection and for the defendants in the French Connection, drug cases that have strong links to the Central Intelligence Agency. These are both cases that involved this illicit activity where there was drug money that was being cleaned to support proxy wars. And I can go on and on for his whole career through the Towers Financial era in the late 80s to the Les Wexner era. I mean, Leslie Wexner, for example, was the largest donor to the Harvard Kennedy Center. The Harvard Kennedy Center is the CIA's #1 playground on American universities for recruiting spies. And then, on the Israel side of it, who was, as I mentioned, Epstein ran the money for Adnan Khashoggi in the mid-1980s. Well, who was the head of Israeli military intelligence during this operation? Now, again, that was a Saudi middleman for a transaction between the United States and Israel. So this was American intelligence and military intelligence working with Israeli intelligence and military intelligence with Saudi money in the middle. And Epstein is running the money for the Saudi middleman in the middle. So he's talking. There's 2 sides of this. There's the BCCI CIA bank, and then there's the Israeli side, who gets the money, runs the guns into its smuggling network at that time in Iran. Well, the head of Israeli military intelligence from 1983 to 1985 was Ehud Barak. We knew before these files dropped that Ehud Barak visited Jeffrey Epstein's house or residence at least 47 times and had done business with Ehud Barak, private business, in everywhere from Russia to Mongolia to Cote d'Ivoire to the UK to the US itself, a company called Carbine 911, a government contractor. And all of this was on military tech, the same sort of evolution of arms dealing that Epstein appears to have been involved in from the very beginning of his career through BCCI and Bear Stearns. What I'm getting at is this: you can understand the Epstein network as being this kind of joint U.S.-Israeli money and influence network that has all of these allied partners in the middle who he's also doing deals with. And that I understand Epstein as a favor bank financial fixer for private funds and secret intelligence agencies. And this is something that I really think is an important moment for people to understand. Take BlackRock, okay? BlackRock is the largest asset manager on planet Earth, $10 trillion of assets under management. As I think we've talked about in the past, Benny, the chairman of the BlackRock Investment Institute is a guy named Tom Donilon. He's also the vice chairman of BlackRock. He was the national security advisor for Barack Obama. So he was the Marco Rubio equivalent for Barack Obama. And it proudly says on his BlackRock bio that he won the CIA's Director Award. Now, the New York Times reported that Joe Biden did not first ask Bill Burns to be his CIA director. He asked Tom Donilon. But Tom Donilon had just joined BlackRock and said no to CIA director. Instead, I'm going to be the vice chairman of BlackRock. Obviously, it makes a lot more money. You're making about $250K with no outside ability to make income as CIA director I can only guess what the vice chairman of BlackRock is making. But the fact is, BlackRock's deal-making decisions, its portfolio investments, the currencies it goes long on or shorts, the debt instruments that it scoops up, they compete in a market. And that market is determined by who has access to inside information. And whoever can trade on national security secrets before the market can wins the market. And everything else that goes up on the basis of that, they get in early and they get out before the bottom drops, because they know from the inside what the U.S. government is doing. Like Wayne Gretzky said, you skate to where the puck is going. If you know that the Department of War is about to invade Iraq, if you know that the Central Intelligence Agency is about to topple the government of Belarus, if you know that the State Department is about to sanction, the banks in Nigeria, well, then you know, but way before the market does, to invest in oil pipeline infrastructure or the companies that you know are going to get the contracts for that oil in Iraq. You know to short the currency of Belarus. You know to, basically, short financial institutions in Nigeria. And this is exactly what we see in dozens of these Epstein files emails. The Lord Mandelson scandal that's playing out right now in the UK is an inside access story where quite literally you have the finance minister who is administering a bailout that is dominating the news, giving advance knowledge to the guy with a huge fund who can trade that market overnight way before, while the market is still hesitant because they don't want to bet one way or the other because it's high magnitude. Entire currencies could fall, entire countries could go into default, or they could get saved, and you don't know whether to take a big bet one way or the other. Well, if you know as a matter of certain fact that from the person doing that classified deal, then you get to make a huge amount of money in the market. And you also, and what I'm saying is this is the same thing that played out in the late 1970s, early 1980s, where you had this web of private financiers and intelligence agencies serving the highest levels of government. This is what played out with deals in the Middle East. I've documented many cases of that as well, even beyond Epstein. This is what was happening in the 1990s during all the accords around Camp David. This is in the special economic opportunity zones that were being set up in countries if they did a certain amount of business with Israel at the behest of the United States. You need a fixer class to arrange those transactions, to herd the cats of donors. And there's an amazing audio file where Jeffrey Epstein was secretly recording the man who was then the head of the Israeli military, longtime friend Ehud Barak, who Epstein surely would have known of, if not worked directly, in the 1980s while he was working on the extended BCCI transactions and Iran-Contra related transactions, because Ehud Barak, 40 years earlier, 35 years earlier, was the head of Israeli military intelligence then. But what you have is a secretly recorded audio tape from 2013, where Ehud Barak is still the Minister of Defense, their equivalent of Secretary of War, their equivalent of Pete Hegseth. He's still running the Israeli military. But 1 month later, he will leave and go private and make millions in the private sector as a private businessman, a civilian now. And before he goes and makes the jump, he has a conversation with his fixer, Jeffrey Epstein, who tells him, stop marketing yourself about, how good you are at doling out government contracts for the best tanks or Iron Dome type stuff. Nobody cares about what you're good at. The only thing that matters is who owes you favors. I want you to create a human index of IOUs, people who owe you something. They owe you a job. They owe you their life because you helped them out of something. They owe you a favor. This is if you remember the 1987 book Bonfire of the Vanities, there's an incredible chapter in there called The Favor Bank. And it describes the crookedness of the New York City criminal justice system. And the whole book is a kind of disillusionment of how justice works in New York City. And there's a whole chapter that explains the inner workings of how it got corrupt and how the system works. And it's called the Favor Bank. And it's about how all career advancement and all decisions within the New York District Attorney's Office operate through a favor bank system. Everyone wants to put a favor in the favor bank for the people that are higher up and the people that are on the outside, whose jobs they want to apply to afterwards, so that those people owe them favors in the form of a job, in the form of some sort of sponsorship or some sort of financial relationship. And so the prosecutors in the district attorney's office do not make prosecutorial decisions on the basis of what justice is. They make prosecutorial decisions on the basis of whether it places a favor in the favor bank for people up and over them. And Jeffrey Epstein represents the over them side of that equation. My concern, Joe Rogan asked me, are there other Epsteins out there? And I said, there's a million of them. In the State Department, there are these Jeffrey Epstein figures who loom around you in the think tank world, in the NGO space. I ran the cyber bureau with, over 100 people under me in 3 different divisions. They're all careers. They need to decide whether to do what I ask them to do because I'm their boss, or what an outside think tank or NGO who them deceiving me or going against me will do a favor for them. And you can see this, by the way, in the form of Eric Ciaramella, the CIA senior political, or he was a mid-level political analyst who was for the Europe and Eurasia desk for the CIA, who was the one who leaked the Trump phone call in 2019 and kicked off the Ukraine impeachment. And then everyone flanked around him to, protect him from any scrutiny. His name was banned on Twitter for a week. It was banned on Facebook Messenger. Well, he was making the salary range for someone in his position was between $90,000 and $130,000 per year. That's the salary range for someone at his level. Where did he go right after? If that was a Trump political, by the way, with no fixer to be able to hook him up with an outside thing, he would be working at Uber Eats. He would be a convenience store clerk. There'd be no job for that person other than the gig economy. But instead, he went straight to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, which is a think tank funded by foundation money that was run by Bill Burns for 7 years, who would become CIA director right when Eric Ciaramella got there. And he's making $280K a year. So, you're making over twice as much for doing a favor. And does anyone doubt that the fixer conversation was not? Do you think he cold applied to the Carnegie Endowment when he was out of a job for 6 months? You line this up before you make the jump. And because these events are all over this city. The foundation events, the think tank, the NGO, and they're sponsored by funds. In Epstein's case, you had the Rothschild Bank, and you had all these private foundations, and they're at those events, and in the emails that you get, and in the I got to introduce you to this person. They have the talk, and it's not just a one-off talk; it's a continuous one. And if you don't follow the devil's temptation and do what would do a favor for that outside group with your government power, you begin to resent the people who are doing the right thing. You begin to feel like, I'm not as good. I'm not a good provider to my wife and family. But if I did this thing, then, my wife would be so proud of me. I could afford private school for my kids or a college fund. And you think, well, geez, maybe what they're telling me to do isn't so bad. They're pitching it like it would be the right thing for the world. And, my boss was a dick to me the other day. What am I doing this for? What am I sacrificing for? The presence of the Epstein class makes it so that United States policy in Every important government agency, State Department, Central Intelligence Agency, Department of War, USAID, people do not make decisions on the basis of what's best for this country. They make it on the basis of what's best for the favor bank. And this Jeffrey Epstein fixer class is that sticky glue between effectively the parties you're making favors for and yourself. And the fact is because he represents that, people want to do favors for Jeffrey Epstein. What you see in these Epstein files are extremely the highest level government officials in multiple countries going out of their way to keep Epstein informed, to give him private access. You saw Kathy Rumler, the White House counsel, the top lawyer for Barack Obama, leaking things, even saying completely non-public things that an award she won from the Central Intelligence Agency, which is still not public to this day. But she told Jeffrey Epstein just hours after she got it from John Brennan. And this is something that Kathy Rumler then gets hooked up to represent the Rothschild Bank in the private sector after she leaves government. Her job's making $200K a year with no opportunity for outside consulting gigs, sitting on boards, sinecures, fellowships. How much you think she made as a Rothschild banker, corporate lawyer? And by the way, even then she negotiated a favorable settlement for the Rothschilds on the basis of a Bank Secrecy Act she appears to have played a role in that was set up by the Obama Justice Department while she was the White House counsel. So it's like the things that she's involved with in government are a favor to those on the outside. She's doing favors for sweet talking the fixer, and then she goes to directly profit herself. So it makes you wonder, is that law? Was that made in the first place as a was it really because we just like giving Swiss bank accounts total secrecy and freedom from punishment? I mean, it's basically what it did, allow them to move money to the United States without suffering all these AML and KYC restrictions that they were under, criminal query. It's like, okay, so did we do that because it's for American interests, or did we do this actually because it allows outside banks to launder money and get away with it? And this also gets back to why I believe the money laundering and financial fixer element of the Jeffrey Epstein scandal is so important. People don't even know that this is the way the world works, let alone that these institutions exist to do it, let alone that they have the influence they do on our daily lives and our ability to actually have good government policy in the United States. And I think that the rush to explain Epstein's protection by the Justice Department and his apparent ability to skate through these crimes for decades is explainable solely because of a international child sex trafficking prostitution ring. I think that while elements of that are true, in whatever degree that is not, in my view, the key or anywhere close to the key to understanding Epstein's protection or his role. And I think that has been the vacuum of a lack of other explanation was filled early by that. And I'm trying to present a more extended version of the universe to fill that void.
This is refreshing for my ears to hear, Mike, because I lived in DC for 15 years and I watched this happen. I watched this happen constantly inside of Democrat administrations, but then, of course, when Republican administrations come along, there isn't the same access into high society or into the virtuous classes. And it's quite remarkable, these Catherine Rumler connections, the Bill Burns connections. It really does mar a bit Obama's legacy. And I do wonder, when will the Obama world be dragged kicking and screaming into all of this? Maybe you can answer that for me, because of course the Clintons are having a really a rough one on this. There are people who I think properly have been destroyed, and their legacies. I mean, Bill Gates' legacy will not be Microsoft; it will be Jeffrey Epstein and viruses, right? And I I do wonder, like with this Rumler, Catherine Rumler was as close as you can get with Barack Obama. And in an email that I don't have directly in front of me, but you can see her tee-hee-heeing with Epstein, who she loved, by the way, and she should absolutely have to come in for questioning. Epstein lavished her with gifts and so on. But you can see them tee-hee-heeing about Obama being at the United Nations for the United Nations conference, World Leaders Conference. She's giving that information to Epstein. They're talking about potentially meeting, with Obama, calling him the big man, which is remarkable. Is exactly what the language that Biden used. Is there any connection? Like, what would be your strongest connection for this ecosystem to Obama world, to affecting Obama world?
By the way, Kathy Rumler, I'll get there, but Kathy Rumler is currently the general counsel of Goldman Sachs. She's the top lawyer for Goldman Sachs, a New York investment bank that is totally adjacent to Bear Stearns. I mean, you can't script it enough in terms of favor banks to this Bear Stearns Goldman Sachs network throughout while she was in government, and then goes to work directly. I don't know what her salary is, but I guarantee you it is at least 10, 20, 30x what she was making at as a U.S. government GS whatever. But in terms of the Clinton administration, it's important to sort of have a few facts in mind about this. One is the Clinton administration, Jeffrey Epstein, White House logs show that he visited the Clinton White House personally at least 17 times. And as I mentioned, Ehud Barak visited Jeffrey Epstein's residence just in New York City, something like 43 or 7 times. Ehud Barak was the prime minister of Israel while Bill Clinton was the president of the United States. So as I mentioned, you had back when Ehud Barak ran Israel's most elite covert intelligence unit for the Israeli military in the 1970s. And then he became the head of military intelligence during Iran-Contra. And then he became prime minister of Israel while Bill Clinton was the president. And then he became defense minister and then, Jeffrey Epstein business partner. But what I'm getting at here is another thing that I found in the files was that in 1999 and in 2011, but let's start with 1999, Bill Clinton was president. Jeffrey Epstein FOIA'd the CIA for all records and all records about himself wherein any open or acknowledged agency affiliations existed between the Central Intelligence Agency and Jeffrey Epstein. So Bill Clinton was president. He was meeting at the White House 17 times. The same Israeli back channels that the guy who ran the main Israeli back channel for the Epstein commercial network 15 years earlier was now the prime minister. The way Mossad is structured is that Mossad sits basically in the prime minister's office. It's a little bit different than the Central Intelligence Agency. But the fact is the military intelligence side, you can understand how Epstein would have run into that in a very direct way with Iran-Contra, because that was literally a military operation of gun running. In terms of Mossad connections, the Mossad would answer when he was prime minister to Ehud Barak. It literally reports up to him. Everything has to be approved by him. And so when you see, for example, these throwaway emails in the Epstein files that say, for example, they're talking about carving up Libya and finding a way to seize $80 billion worth of Libyan assets that are held in various banks. That requires someone at Treasury to do a favor for you, someone at the State Department to do a favor for you. And what he says, and that also includes other governments who co-participated in the Libya operation. And what he says is, I've got some MI6/Mossad guys that can help. Now, that's a situation where the MI6 side makes total sense because the Brits were in with Jeffrey Epstein and the Americans and the Israelis on the Iran-Contra and BCCI affair. In fact, the New York Times described totally cluelessly how in 1981 and 1982, a young Jeffrey Epstein at just 28 years old was making trips to London to stay at the home of Douglas Leese. They forgot a wealthy, aristocrat class guy with a palatial estate in a British countryside. They conveniently leave out that Douglas Leese was one of the largest illicit arms dealer in British history. He's the thing that he is famous for, even in his friggin' Wikipedia, is his arms dealing. And this is while MI6 and the U.S. and Israelis were running the gun running operation to Iran through Jeffrey Epstein's friggin' client, Adnan Khashoggi. What I'm getting at here, though, is you can understand how he might have MI6 guys from that Douglas Leese story and from everything that he, did with the highest levels of government in UK, whether it's the royal family or whether it's the finance ministers like Lord Mandelson. And you can understand how he had those contacts from the Israelis, because even at the Bear Stearns network, it was Ace Greenberg, who's a longtime Affinity network donor, and the thing that Jeffrey Epstein got in trouble for the first time he got in trouble with the law was an SEC investigation into him for doing hot deals, that is giving pre-IPO sweet deals to friends, favors to friends, in 1980 on a deal for Edgar Bronfman, who at the time was the chairman of the World Jewish Congress, and Bronfman was changing the role of the WJC at that time to serve as a kind of shadow State Department in the kind of NGO advocacy space to tie it very strongly to the Israeli Ministry for Strategic Affairs. So you had this network of clients and deal makers where it was justified on U.S. national security interests and U.S. national interests to work with groups in Israel and work with groups in the U.S. And Epstein built this strong affinity network and then leveraged it for private deal making. And because that you have so much capital to deploy and all the other perks with parties and girls and things like that, everyone wanted to do a favor for Epstein because Epstein was the gateway to becoming a made man.
This is such a beautiful architecture that you have developed here to explain what it is. I know that it is complicated, and I know that it takes quite a bit of doing, but this makes perfect sense to me. Anybody who's been close up to the bureaucracy is able to see the handoff and the silent handshake that happens between the private and public sector. But you need the facilitator in order to make it legal, or in order to make sure that nobody goes to jail, or nobody goes to jail immediately. And you explaining how Epstein was that facilitator between the people who are making the decisions in government and them getting filthy rich on the outside, and a bunch of other people getting filthy rich on the outside, that makes so much sense, Mike. Makes so much sense. It also makes a lot of sense as to why people are now accusing Jeffrey Epstein of being the man who started Bitcoin. What do you think about that? Because cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is all over Jeffrey Epstein's emails. He's going to the Treasury to talk about Bitcoin in 2014. Bitcoin wasn't even publicly available in 2014, right? It's not like very few people were trading in Bitcoin or even talking about it. 2014. It would seem like the crypto space. He's talking about making crypto capital, like moving the crypto capital to Dubai, making like a meme coin in Israel. He's having these conversations like a decade ago, when the public interest in the space was virtually zero. And
I don't have a tip jar, and I don't have a coin, so I'm putting a Zin in my pretend tip jar. Listen, I'm sorry, but the Benz theory of Bitcoin was right. Just put another Zin in, put another dollar in. I have been for years, since 2018, I was saying this, but I gave two formal speeches. I'm asked to speak at a lot of Bitcoin conferences and Bitcoin podcasts because of my advocacy around free speech is a natural complement to what's promoted as free speech money. Obviously, when you deplatform someone and they can't use PayPal or Stripe or Square and they have to use Bitcoin for transactions, as many people did during at the peak of the censorship era here in the United States, there was a lot of overlap, between the political advocacy side of free speech and the operational possibility to end run financial censorship through something that cuts out the middleman. And in 2018, I began to see things that made me pull out of the thing completely. Now, that's not because I thought it wouldn't go up. Let me explain this, because I gave 2 talks at the Bitcoin conference, the biggest Bitcoin conference in the world, 2 years ago and last year. And when they first asked me on the main stage to talk to the whole address, the biggest Bitcoin conference in the world, when they asked me, I said, "Are you sure you want me to talk at this? Because did you see the videos that I've done on this?" And they said, "Oh, yeah, definitely." I said, all right. Now, both years in a row, I have publicly given the same speech, and it's called Bullish on Bullshit. And the theme of the speech was, congratulations, you guys are all making a lot of money. You're going to be making a lot of money for a long time to come. I am not, the message I'm about to impart on you is not to pull your, coin out of Bitcoin. I am bullish on the market. And the thing that you really care about, making money, getting rich, you will achieve by being in this space, or at least right up until the moment you don't. But the reason that I am bullish on it is because of the fact that this entire space is bullshit. Everything about the way the crypto market works, particularly the stablecoin mediators to it, the way it's used, there's 2 reasons that that this thing is going to go up. So the bullshit element of it essentially is, Bitcoin should have died in 2014 with the Mt. Gox scandal. It went basically to zero. All the exchanges, died except Bitfinex. And without getting anyone in trouble or ruffling too many feathers, what I'll say is a strange thing happened in 2014 that resurrected and then skyrocketed the field of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency more broadly. Something very inorganic that never got audited. If anyone wants to look into the Mt. Gox scandal and what resurrected it, you will see the answer. I'll leave it at that for there. But the reason that I'm bullish on it is because I'm long on 2 things. I'm long on banks wanting to use stablecoins. Stablecoins are the things that basically allow you to have liquidity. They keep all the volume on platform. You don't need to exchange off into fiat, and it allows all manner of interesting complexity to develop within the space by having this giant liquidity pool represented. I mean, if you remember, what happened in 2008 was a liquidity run. And that's what kicked off the crisis. Well, the stablecoins prevent that. But because they transact everything in US dollar denominations, it means that anybody around the world, in Europe, in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, using a different currency, transacting in stablecoins, creates a dollar. And so you prop up the dollar. In fact, there was a full page spread the day after Saudi Arabia announced during the Biden administration it might not continue the petrodollar arrangement beyond 2027. There was a full page spread in the Wall Street Journal by Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, that crypto could stave off a U.S. debt crisis because of the very stable coins that hoaxed the world into investing in Bitcoin in the first place in 2014 out of the Mt. Gox disaster. And now, so stable coins allow you to basically have a offshore Federal Reserve. It prints U.S. dollars, and it props it up at a time when China's divesting from U.S. dollars. the petrodollar arrangement was looking like it might be cut out. And so to protect the dollar, so I'm long on the U.S. Treasury and Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan and, you name it, propping up the dollar. And I'm also very long on CIA money laundering. What stablecoins allow you to do you remember the James Comer oversight investigation of the Joe Biden shell companies, where the House Oversight Committee declared that it knew exactly how the 10% was being kicked up to the big guy by Hunter Biden, but it took them something like 2.5 years to trace the 32 shell companies or something to be able to prove it. Well, what you can do through stablecoins and Bitcoin and stablecoins is you can create 32 layers of shell companies, 300 layers of shell, because you don't even need to set up a company. You don't even need to have a registered address, home address. You don't even need to, have a banking KYC, confirmation that this is not a money laundering operation. You set up an account just like that, and you can have thousands of them. It'll take you decades to unwind that, to figure out, and prove in court that this was actually a money laundering transaction and not just people organically exchanging, cryptocurrency or buying things from one another. So it's the CIA's playground. And not just the CIA. I mean, every intelligence agency on planet Earth can use this. Everyone says, this is the knock on Bitcoin that libertarians got pissed about for a long time, is that regulators would say it's only used for selling drugs and arranging hitman, paying hitman to kill people in these things. And the libertarians went, no, it's not. Look, I bought a banana with it. It's like, well, you're both right and you're both wrong. It is being used for that. But it's being used by governments, intelligence services, corporate espionage firms, and this sticky, overworld, underworld Jeffrey Epstein class folks to buy those drugs, to launder those guns, to pay those hitmen, to pay a bribe to a judge or a judge's wife. And the intelligence services and the governments whose policies that they serve and the private financial interests that those government officials serve in their government office are always looking for a new technique in the evolutionary arms race against journalists and well-minded regulators whose job is to track them down and whose job is to find out what the latest trick is they're using. And this allows them to totally outpace the regulators. And so I believe that it's a bull market in it because the appetite for that kind of money laundering is infinite.
Do you believe that Jeffrey Epstein created Bitcoin? You have this Daniel Pena clip that's going so viral, and he's like, you won't be able to sleep at night. I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah.
You find out who created Bitcoin, you're not going to be able to sleep at night, and it's going to effing zero. And there's a lot of people crashing out over this. Obviously, Bitcoin's lost 50% of it. And I'm not some huge crypto guy. I'm really not. I'm not rooting for one side or the other. I'm not a crypto hate, and I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not a crypto hate channel. I'm not trying to sell anything. So but you look at these emails. I mean, this email with the Rothschild, with Larry Summers and the Rothschild with Jeffrey Epstein. He's talking about Bitcoin. Like, what are the uses of Bitcoin? Oh, aiding and abetting money laundering. That's like number one. He writes.
Yeah.
To Larry Summers. Structuring. Exactly what you talked about. Transmitting money without a license. Patriot Act violations.
I am on record saying that both Bitcoin and Jeffrey Epstein, the main way to understand them is the money laundering role. It's and like these emails come out that say, let's see, I said it was the U.S. Treasury who had the interest in Bitcoin for dollar dominance in these things, and who is Larry Summers, the head of the U.S. Treasury?
I mean, it's right here, and you can read it.
Yes,
Mike is right again, proven right this week, I guess, in black and white from Jeffrey Epstein. So, what do you think? Is that why? Is this why? Is this why there's a lot of instability in this asset?
Yeah. Because, it's not like a steady flow of, these things don't work on like a schedule where like every week we do a new op and, we give a set annuity to our rebel groups in, on the ground in Venezuela. I mean, think about this. See if you can pull this up on screen. Circle's partnership with the U.S. government for stablecoins. For stablecoin work to support Venezuela. Check this out. It's from a couple years ago. Now, George Soros is a major investor in another banker, financial class guy, tightly tied to intelligence services and statecraft and bankers who runs a fund himself, just like Jeffrey Epstein. There's and if not, you can find it on if you just do a local search on my X profile, you'll see this. Mm-hmm. Circle. Now, what happened was there's another stablecoin company that was until Circle really the only player in the space. But that company is something of a Wild West, I'll say. And Circle was created to be a government regulated stablecoin, formerly government regulated, not just a pure private company, but it is a private company, but it's got all these regulatory handcuffs on it. Now, Circle struck a deal with the Biden administration where the person at Circle, when they made this announcement and spoke to the press about it, they refused to say which agency in the U.S. government they held the partnership with. That alone tells you something, by the way. If I can't tell you what the agency is, it's either the CIA or it is a agency that knows that this is for CIA purposes. Now, what this was, and see if you can find the Venezuela one on it, just so you don't have to take my word for it. Circle Venezuela. Now, what happened was we've been trying to regime change Venezuela for a very long time. If you remember, the first Trump administration tried to capture Maduro in the Jordan Goudreau Silver Corp affair, the Bay of Piglets with that Florida security firm, failed in doing so. But we have this faction of U.S. aligned political and military groups on the ground. The problem is it's really hard to fund them, to capacity build them to go against the Venezuelan government because you can't get money into Venezuela through the Venezuelan state banking system. And if the Venezuelan counterintelligence sees that money hits your bank account from a U.S. source or from a U.S. bank, then they treat it as a CIA intervention and they arrest anyone who receives that money. So what the mystery U.S. government agency X came up with is the brilliant idea to use stablecoins, the undergirding architecture of Bitcoin, as the way to launder money into Venezuela without the Venezuelan government being able to stop it by airdropping people crypto on their phone so that money never touched the Venezuelan state banking system. So this was, while plucky libertarians are talking about how, the purpose of cryptocurrency is to, and go ahead. And it's a hilarious article. If you scroll down, you'll see Circle partners with, yes, right. And so what you'll see here is it says, so it's a partnership with Juan Guaido. Okay. If you just, scroll down to the Juan Guaido part, it's a little bit up. Yep. Yeah. Well, okay. So if it's what I was pointing out is Juan Guaido. If you remember Juan Guaido, if you just pause right there, you see through a collaboration with Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, led by President-elect Juan Guaido. Juan Guaido was the CIA-backed guy that Silvercorp had the contract, a $1.5 million retainer to capture Maduro, and a $220 million success fee if they successfully installed Juan Guaido. So this is not money to Venezuelans. This is money that will only go to the Juan Guaido faction at the time of this partnership. So they can micro-target the money rather than an aid program. They can run it just to the rebel groups on their phones of the ones who are being backed by the CIA without cutting out the middleman of the Venezuelan state banking system. So, well, like I was saying, while plucky libertarians think that, this is such a clever way of like cutting out the middleman of banks between peer-to-peer transactions, that ain't how Bitcoin is used. Not 99% of it. It's not retail, and it never will be. It's not like that's not the only middleman that's being cut out, right? If I want to buy a banana from you and I'm cutting out the bank in the middle with crypto, the CIA, Israeli intelligence, British intelligence, Saudi intelligence, they have a need to cut out the middleman of the bank in order to run money to CIA, Israeli, Saudi, British backed rebel groups, drug dealers, criminals, bribes. And so this is a elite way of money laundering at scale with precision and with far less downside risk, because you're also, nobody has to keep your secret. If you try to, like in the BCCI bank, one of the reasons it collapsed, the CI's bank there, is because when people started asking questions, people at the various BCCI branches who did not work at CIA, who did not have the protection or goading of the U.S. government while they were sitting in offices in Luxembourg or London or Switzerland, or Pakistan, when local regulators said, what the hell is going on with this? They said, well, the CIA was in here. They set up this account. They were in here last week. They told me to do it. Nobody can squeal when you're setting up a crypto account rather than a bank branch office where you need to have a relationship with the branch manager. So you keep the circle of trust very, very, very small. So you have way less risk exposure at the time of an investigation.
So the architecture that you just laid out here makes so much sense to me, Mike, and I love it. I know that we're tight on time here, but I've been waiting for an explanation, and I know that we've been rolling for an hour, but I've been waiting for an explanation that really puts the nodes together. And it makes so much sense, and it makes so much sense as to why the world's richest men and royal families and presidents were going to Epstein. The one very quick question I have for you is then why all of the rape, torture, and murder? Does this just go along with this style of fixer work and dark arts? Is this just a satanic fetish thing for Jeffrey Epstein? Is this something that's been totally overblown and you don't see it anymore? Or is this something that is rampant among the elites?
Well, this is something that I've spoken a lot with, and I may have to, leave you with a reference. I did speak about this on Rogan this week for about an hour, and I've posted this position many times. I mean, there's the very, very short version is that I believe that Epstein saw the power of being a party host with young, attractive women that could be doled out to prospective clients and customers as a way to juice deals. That is, girls juice deals, parties juice deals. I gave an example on Rogan of how someone at Goldman or someone at Rothschild or someone at the Bank of England who wants to go into the private sector may want to go through with a deal simply because Epstein is the source of their girls and parties, even if it's a deal they'd normally be reticent or the risk profile is too high, because they don't want to say no to an offer to go in on an investment, to go in on a philanthropic drive. I'm being charitable when I say that, obviously, but because they don't want the access cut off to something that, if you look at it from the perspective of like a 65-year-old guy who hasn't slept with his wife in 3 years or 6 years or 10 years, who's got all the money in the world, but can't walk into a bar and meet like an 18-year-old or, and I know that some of them were, clearly underage, but also you've got the jurisdiction shopping on that. Adnan Khashoggi was doing the same thing. Epstein's client with young girls and giant parties and the like. I sometimes wonder if Epstein learned the tools of the trade of that, so to speak, in the 1980s, representing the clients in that network and saying, okay, this is how he makes all this money. It's because governments will want to buy these transactions. That's not even necessarily if they need the guns, but because they want to make him happy so that they get access to the parties and the girls and things like that. And it's it's quite possible that, I mean, what I always cite, like Biggie's 10 crack commandments for this. Rule number 4 is never get high on your own supply. I think that Epstein started as a dealer and then got high on his own supply of that, if that makes sense. And not necessarily dealing in like a formal, organized, structured way. I don't think you'd have time in the day to be a full-time pimp with everything else Epstein was running. I think it started with knowing that to get billionaires at your party and for them to be super happy and want to do business with you, you have to have a very heavy girl-guy ratio to make it a fun party. And the girls have got to be young and attractive. And then, the international clients where they don't have the same age laws, for example, in many places in the Middle East, it's not 18 there. And I mean, this is something DynCorp got in trouble with in the early 2000s as a military contractor, sending girls to Arab sheikhs to juice deals. And given that Epstein was a kind of military equipment facilitator, I mean, there's a lot of folks in this space. I mean, as to the other things, I don't know that we see emails around the torture and, obviously I think there's a there when it comes to the Pizzagate stuff, because it was the first thing domestically to be censored on the internet, insanely. And there's a lot of talk in these files about things that are impossible to do to a pizza. I mean, even more so than what kicked off, you left a handkerchief that seems pizza related. I mean, it's way more impossible. But the point is I don't know exactly what's going on there. There definitely looks like there's something dark and funky and dystopian and evil. I would be reticent to call that the cake of the Epstein story, as opposed to the icing on top of the evils I just described. But if that can be further explored, I'm open-minded. But researchers really need to do a good job of providing credible, substantiated leads to be able to really run down confidence in those kind of theories, in my view.
I know that we're up against a hard out here. Do you have your over under on anything happening? Is anyone going to go to jail for this in the United States of America?
Who wants to be a hero? Any member of Congress. Thomas Massey, run it back. Okay? The same bill you just did for the Justice Department files, you can do the exact same thing for the CIA files. Okay? The Epstein Disclosure Act was only for DOJ originated files, which sweeps up FBI because they're DOJ's investigative arm. The JFK files were CIA originated. There was something in 1992 called the JFK Records Collection Act, which forced, by law, the Central Intelligence Agency to set up an independent auditing and review and oversight body to independently review classified files and propose them for declassification. So we got the first batch of CIA JFK documents in 1997 after 5 years of that board's work, and then continued to get updates on them in 2013, 2017, and then the big one in 2025. But that only happened because you had the legal mechanism in place. Put the legal mechanism in place, and then bang the gong every month about if they violate the law. And they might not want, for example, they might have an incentive to comply. That way, a future administration doesn't find them non-compliant. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons to do this right away, get the ball rolling. Who's going to want to be against this? The Epstein DOJ files bill was 427-1 and 99-0 in the Senate. Who's going to want to be on the other side of a CIA declassification? What couldn't be me.
All right. Let's do it. CIA files on Epstein is actually where we need to source the true beating heart of all of this. So,
and if there is if an independent, bipartisan, auditing and oversight board says, actually, there are none, or there's only a few, but they're, related to some counterintelligence thing that we need to know that so that we can be educated when we vote for people on the basis of their adjacency to the Epstein networks. So even if the answer is there's not as much there as Benz is saying, great. Can you tell us?
Great. Can you tell us? This has been the bumper sticker of the entire Epstein saga for the last decade. Mike Benz has been great, and he's told us, and he's been right. And this side of Alex Jones, man, I think one of the most right people on planet Earth. And I just want to say thank you, Mike, for your clarity on all of this. Millions of people follow Mike. You should be one of them right here on his X account. Godspeed, Mike. Thank you.
Be well, Benny.
Every time Mike Benz is on, I wish we had 3 hours. Rogan does like 4-hour interviews with him. First answer was 40 minutes. Yeah. Well, a lot of talk about how money laundering happens, a lot of talk about fiat currencies, a lot of talk about what many called digital gold. Get yourself some real gold, man. Advantage gold, let's be honest, gold and silver are exploding, and there are ups and downs to every single market. But they've hit new all-time highs recently, and while the media melts down, smart Americans are cashing in, growing their money with physical gold and silver. If you got a 401k IRA or a retirement account, this is your wake-up call. You can keep trusting the same broken system, or you can flip those assets into gold. Advantage Gold is one of America's #1 rated precious metals companies. Here's how to get started. Text Advantage Gold by texting Benny to 85545 right now. That's Benny to 85545. You'll instantly get a free gold investment kit, and you can get started in the golden era along with me. I also do invest in gold. Text Benny to 85545 right now and find out how you are able to profit and help protect your savings with Advantage Gold. Our show also brought to you by Patriot Mobile. Always brought to you by Patriot Mobile. I say always because it just seems like for years, and it's true, for years they have backed our company. And we're just thankful for Patriot Mobile. They're an incredible wireless provider, but more important than that, they're a company that reflects your values. They're the only conservative Christian organization that sells top-tier cell phone service. And the best part is that premium service comes on all 3 major networks. So you are 100% backed by U.S. customer service and incredible data plans, mobile hotspots, international roaming, and more. Make the switch today. Switching is easier than ever. Go to patriotmobile.com/Benny or call 972-PATRIOT and use the promo code Benny for a free month of service. That's patriotmobile.com/Benny or call 972-PATRIOT to make the switch today. Ladies and gentlemen, our verse of the day to send you off into your weekend from Romans. Pay to all what is owed to them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue are owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed. Pardon me. I'm getting emotional here listening to Mike Benz finally explain the Jeffrey Epstein out. Yeah, man. Live a life where respect and honor is actually owed, right? Like nobody ever gets respect by demanding, you will respect me. That never happened. No, it makes you actually respect them less when people say stuff like that. No. Live a life that is deserving of honor and respect. And that's what most people want in life, right? As you look through sort of the cretinous and diseased and broken rot that this week of Epstein files disclosures has brought us, it makes it all the more imperative for us to live lives of salt and light unto this world, to be different from the world. There is no respect or honor among thieves. Look at how Epstein's best friends, like Bill Gates, treats him now, right? There's no respect or honor there. They're all scum. It's rats. Rat eat rat. No. Live a very, very different life. And do so with us because, at the end of our lives and at the end of all of this, we're guaranteed the thing that everybody wants, which is actually the victory, to win in the end. March your thoughts to victory and have a great weekend in this, the greatest country on earth. It's your boy Benny. See ya.
Truth gon' be faith and freedom on your TV screen. Stand up strong, battle through the night. The Benny Show's here, bringing liberty to life. From the speeches to debates, Benny sharp like a blade, cutting through the lies. Watch the truth cascade with the warrior's heart. This man never fades. You know it's prime time when Benny invades. From saving the nation to stories untold, the Benny Show's a storm, see the truth unfold. Stay in the loop, let freedom take hold. Salting all the libs, soul never sold. It's the Benny Show, where the truth gon' be. Faith and freedom on your TV screen. Stand up strong, battle through the night. The Benny Show's here, bringing liberty to light. Liberty to light. Bringing liberty to light. Liberty to light. Bringing liberty to life. From the speeches to debates, Benny sharp like a blade, cutting through the lies. Watch the truth cascade with the warrior's heart. This man never fades. You know it's prime time when Benny invades. From saving the nation to stories untold, the Benny Show's a storm, see the truth unfold. Stay in the loop, let freedom take hold. Salting all the libs, soul never sold. It's the Benny Show, where the truth gon' be. Faith and freedom on your TV screen. Stand up strong, battle through the night. The Benny Show's here, bringing liberty to light. Bringing liberty to light. Bringing liberty to light. Bringing liberty to light. Bringing liberty to light.